Okay, this week's topic is focusing on the northern phase of the Revolutionary War. This is week 13 of our year, and we're about to be wrapping up this Revolutionary Era unit. And all the stuff that we talked about again thus far is the lead up to the war. Last week we talked a little bit about the beginning of the war, the invasion of New York, the battles of Trenton and Princeton. And at this point, America is kind of struggling once again. You know, remember when Washington and his men were across the Delaware facing enormous obstacles in front of them. The northern phase really starts in 1777 after that, those battles at Trenton and Princeton, and just shows the American military is at quite a disadvantage when compared to the British. We have the British, who at this point have controlled Newport, Rhode Island, which is one of the larger cities in Rhode Island at the time. They control New York City as well, and they also control Canada. Being that they control these 3 points, they essentially have control of the northeast area. They can launch military attack and hold soldiers in 3 different places in the north. So they really have it on lockdown for the most part. The main mission that they had at this point was still to take control completely of the Hudson River, because up to this point all they had control of was New York City in the south. So the plan was for General Howe to march his soldiers up from New York City to Albany, New York, along the Hudson River, along the way, establishing forts and taking control of the river. And from the south, General Burgoyne would come down from Canada, doing the same thing. And they were going to meet in Albany. And when they met there, they would have, hopefully, complete control of the Hudson River. But plans sort of change with General Howe. General Burgoyne is still going to come down from Canada, but General Howe decides to go to Philadelphia instead of Albany. He thinks that he has enough time to go to Philadelphia, put his men there, basically gain Philadelphia for the British, and then move up to Albany. But that never actually happens. Howe takes his men down to Philadelphia, and this really delays a lot of the British plan to take over the Hudson River. And this is how General Howe takes control of Philadelphia. This confusing map here, I'll kind of circle a few things. First off, him and General Washington meet once again in the Battle of Brandywine, which is just outside of Philadelphia. Washington loses fairly easily. Then they meet again at the Battle of Germantown about a month later. Again, Washington loses once again. Howe has a superior force. He has 17,000 men fighting with him. And then after Brandywine and Germantown, this is what leads the British to take control of Philadelphia. And in the meantime, Washington and his men, after these 2 losses, they go ahead and move over to Valley Forge, and this is where they make camp throughout the winter of 1777 into 1778. So the fall of 1777 is a time period when General Howe defeats Washington twice and takes control of Philadelphia, which leads to the Continental Congress leaving and evacuating Philadelphia. And at the end of 1777, a year after the battles of Trenton and Princeton, Washington finds himself once again in Pennsylvania, but at Valley Forge. And we'll get back to that later. Now, the other man in this equation is General Burgoyne. Gentleman Johnny is his nickname because he travels so lavishly. He's a very well-educated man, very fancy, I guess, lack of a better term. Drinks champagne during battle, stops to have these long-lasting lunches and dinners, and slows his men down as they march. But that's his style, and he's a very successful general at this point in history. One of the things that made his travel rather difficult from Canada down to Albany, New York, is this. This is a picture of the Hudson River near Canada, and you can see it's heavily forested. It's swampy. There's some marshlands. It's a very difficult terrain to travel through, and so this difficult terrain, along with General Burgoyne's style of traveling large, having 30 wagons of clothes and dozens of other wagons for food and champagne, just makes it a treacherous journey, something that takes much longer than expected. One of the reasons it takes longer than expected is because this guy, Daniel Morgan. Daniel Morgan leads a group of riflemen who are from Virginia. Basically, they're snipers. They're sharpshooters that the Continental Army has brought into the fold. And they're fighting on behalf of American independence. And they're assigned to go up to New York along with other regiments and other groups from the Army to basically prevent Burgoyne from moving further south. And so Morgan and his riflemen basically scout and stalk Burgoyne's men throughout their travel from Canada down to Albany, and they begin firing and shooting, and then running away. It's called guerrilla warfare, where they conduct these surprise attacks and then back off, and they're never really ever found, but they're successful because they are able to slow down Burgoyne even more. And they slow down enough so that General Gates and Commander Arnold, Benedict Arnold, these two men can get their men up to New York as well. So because Burgoyne's taking forever to get down to Albany, it gives these two generals and commanders a chance to bring their men up and prevent Burgoyne from moving even further south. And where they end up meeting is the Battle of Saratoga. Okay, and these are the two battles that occur in Saratoga. We have Freeman's Farm on the left, and then the other battle that occurs about 18 days later is Bemis Heights. So these two battles, Freeman's Farm and Bemis Heights, are the two battles. And in each of these battles, the Americans have the clear advantage. They have the high ground, they have fortifications built, and the British are the attacking force. In Freeman's Farm on September 19th of 1777, Burgoyne's men are pushed back after battle, and they basically wait, and what they're waiting for, they wait for about 2 weeks, they're waiting for General Howe and his men to come up from New York City. But what Burgoyne doesn't know is that Howe has gone down to Philadelphia and is not going to be there. And so as Howe waits for reinforcements and doesn't get them, he begins to get desperate. And on October 7th, he launches sort of a last-ditch effort at Bemis Heights, and this attack is not successful at all. He ends up having to surrender to General Gates and Commander Benedict Arnold, and the Battle of Saratoga is won. The reason that the Battle of Saratoga is so important to our entire story here is that, from one, it prevented the British from taking full control of the Hudson River, that it stopped them at Saratoga, which is north of Albany, and it prevented Burgoyne from going even further south. And so, not that America had control of the Hudson River or anything like that, but it just prevented the British from taking complete control of that region. And that's really one of the main strategies of the North. It isn't that they have to win the war; it's that they have to prevent the South from, they have to prevent the British from winning. So it's a very defensive battle. The second reason the Battle of Saratoga is important is that it began to convince other countries to help the Americans in their fight against the British. The main instance of that is the Treaty of Amity, which happens about 6 months later. This is when the French and the Americans work out an alliance of friendship to fight against the British. And so the French donate money, donate supplies, donate navy, donate soldiers to fight the British. And the Treaty of Amity is what happens, again, about 6 months after the Battle of Saratoga. Now, the other half of what we're learning this week is George Washington's leadership a little bit further south in Pennsylvania, and then the taking back of Philadelphia. And as Saratoga is finishing up, Washington begins to move his men after the losses at Brandywine and Germantown. He takes his men into Valley Forge, which is about 20 miles northwest of Philadelphia. And at Valley Forge, as you see in this picture, I'll move back real quick. You see, it's tough conditions. It's a cold winter. The men are running out of supplies. They're running out of food. But they're able to piece it together. And although there's many people that struggle, there's disease and starvation. A lot of people are able to persevere through that. You can see the huts that they build in the back. They basically build a small military encampment out of nothing. And men that help George Washington in this are foreigners. Marquis de Lafayette is one of the key soldiers that help Washington, and he's from France. But he's so loyal to Washington, and he's such an expert in military training that he helps Washington build this encampment, build the forts, the things necessary to have a fort run. He's able to help Washington do that. And on the other side, he's got Baron von Steuben, who's from Europe as well, from Germany. He he helps Washington with a lot of the military training, begins to turn the Continental Army into a more professional army and made of professional warriors. And this will be beneficial down the road. Where this is beneficial is when the British start to change their tactics. Washington and his men take basically about 4, 5, 6 months off, where they're not fighting, but they're training and they're waiting for the right time to attack. The British have changed strategy where they're not really happy with what General Howe is doing. He's been in Philadelphia for about 6 months, and nothing's really been accomplished. They haven't defeated the Americans. They've basically just been staying in Philadelphia, and nothing is getting done. And so the British removed General Howe from power and put General Henry Clinton in his place. And Clinton comes in, and within a couple of months begins to move his men out of Philadelphia and back up to New York City. And this is occurring in the late May, early June of 1778. And so while he's moving his men out, Washington sees this as a time to attack. And this is known as the Battle of Monmouth, where you have George Washington and his men launching an attack with Baron von Steuben and Marquis de Lafayette's training and all of the experience they'd gone through at Valley Forge. They're using that experience to help them. And what ends up happening is it basically ends in a tie. But like I said, the fact that they were able to stand toe-to-toe with the British military was a success. Basically, getting it to a draw was a success. And the reason Battle of Monmouth is also significant is this is the last big battle in the North during the Revolutionary War. At this point, Clinton is able to escape after fighting that day. During the night, he escapes across the Delaware across the Hudson into New York City, and that was pretty much it. From that point on, the British were only planning on using New York, Rhode Island, and Canada as places to launch their navy, to store goods and things like that. But they were going to start turning their fighting down to the south and fighting the war there. And so the Battle of Monmouth is important for that reason. Okay, so this week we've talked quite a bit about all these different battles, really the meat and bones of meat and potatoes, of the Revolutionary War, where you have the British going against the Americans, and the Americans being, although severely outnumbered, seem to find a way to win during this period. They use guerrilla-style warfare, which is sneak attacks. They wait for the right time to attack. They're not just going toe-to-toe every time. They're picking moments of weakness for the British when they can attack them. And that's really how they end up winning the war in the North and then also in the South when we get to that next week. All right, let me know if you have any questions, and you guys have a great day.